Gypsy, you grew up so sheltered and so isolated. How have you adjusted to suddenly living your life in front of the cameras?
It's a huge adjustment. I'm still adjusting. I don't think it ever becomes normal for everybody to recognize me so much. Um, but it's a process, and I'm processing.
I have to say, I've spent a couple of days with you now.
Mhm.
You don't strike me as someone who's capable of planning a murder.
Well, I mean, my situation was very centered around my circumstances. So I can honestly say I would have never committed that crime had I not been pushed to the brink where I really just snapped.
So when you think back on your childhood, on your memories of your mother,
Mhm.
what are those memories like? What emotions do you feel?
I have a lot of emotions that are attached to life with my mom. Some of them are good because not all times were bad. Um, but there are times, when things were good, things were good. When things were bad, things were real bad.
Did you love her?
Of course, I loved my mom.
And did she love you?
I struggle with that question. And I still don't know the answer. I like to think that my mom loved me in her own way.
As a parent, there's a ferocious protectiveness
Mm-hmm.
that kicks in. You'll feel it, I'm sure.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the thought of anyone harming my child or my child being in any sort of pain, it's almost an animal instinct
Right.
to stop that and protect it.
Mm-hmm.
So it is hard to imagine how a mother could deliberately hurt their own child. Do you still grapple with that?
I do, especially now carrying my own child. I can't imagine, like, I go through the daily things of wondering even if a cup of coffee is, too much for my baby. Something so simple. So I cannot even fathom how a mom could knowingly do anything to her child to purposely cause pain or suffering for attention purposes. I can't, or any purpose. I can't imagine. I don't understand it.
What did she tell you and medical professionals was wrong with you?
There was a long list of medical illnesses that my mom told the doctors that I had, ranging from muscular dystrophy to leukemia, hearing impaired, vision impaired, anything that could be wrong with someone, honestly.
And you believed her?
I did believe her because I grew up that way. So it started from infancy. So she started telling the doctors that I had sleep apnea when I was just a baby. And then it graduated to a seizure disorder. And she kept building on that list of things. So by the end of it all, there was not a single part of my body that didn't have something supposedly wrong with it.
What was the perceived illness or what in fact caused you to lose all your teeth?
So the cause is actually not known. All that I know from the medical records is that my mother told them that my teeth were very fragile and were crumbling, and so they decided to extract. So the dentist extracted several of my teeth, capped other teeth in chrome caps, and that's what happened to my teeth. So it's mysterious why doctors and dentists would remove healthy teeth. So I'm not really sure.
At what stage or age did you realise that it was a farce?
I mean, there are some things that I already knew that obviously I could walk. I knew that I could walk. I knew that I could eat, so I didn't need the feeding tube. But the other things like cancer, you can't see that. So I had believed that I had cancer up until the time that I was arrested and could talk to my lawyer.
You said you knew you could walk,
Mm-hmm.
and yet you were in the wheelchair even at home with your mum?
Correct. It was not just an outside thing. It was not an outside facade. On the inside, I couldn't even walk. So even on the inside, my mom, when she was around, did not let me walk around the house.
So total control.
Total control, yes.
So the question that so many people can't understand, and perhaps only, in fact, victims and survivors of abuse can, the question so many people want to know, why didn't you get up and walk? Tell someone, run away, tell a doctor?
That is the one question that that everyone seems to ask. I don't think people understand the emotional hold that an abuser has on their victims. So, asking me that is the same as putting me in a category of saying, well, domestic violence survivors, why didn't they just leave their abusive husbands? It's because of that emotional hold that the abuser has.
And the consequences that you felt would arise from it.
Exactly. I didn't know if things would be worse for me at home, because often when I did try to rebel and go against her, the arguments and there were physical abuse that was going on in the home. So it was worse.
Knowing what you know now, do you believe your mother was very ill?
I do. I still grapple with the reality that I kind of wonder if she knew intentionally what she was doing, or if it was just she was so mentally unstable that maybe it clouded her judgment. But I'd like to think better of her, that she didn't know and it was out of her control.
Do you think the motivation was the attention or the financial gain, the free holidays, the free home?
I fully believe that the attention was the main cause of it. The financial was secondary.
So at what point did you make that decision that killing your mother was the only way that you could be free?
I want to say it was around the time that I felt like I had tried to exhaust all the options that I thought was available to me. So I ran away from home. She brought me back found me, brought me back within 4 hours of being gone. She had chained me to a bed, and there was a lot of physical abuse for 2 weeks. So I felt like I had learned my lesson, that was not a route that I could take. And so then your survival mode starts to kick in and you're like, okay, it's either her or me. What do I need to do to get out of here? And unfortunately, that was a thought in my head.
It's a sign of the desperation. I think you were such a, seemingly sweet young woman with having lived a very sheltered life.
Exactly.
That's where your mind went.
Exactly. Because it's not like I had a criminal record. It's not that I had a history of violence or anything like that.
Been running with the wrong crowd?
No running with the wrong crowd. It was
In fact, you had no friends.
I didn't have any friends. I wasn't allowed to. So she controlled everything in my life, my physical appearance, what I ate, who I was allowed to hang out, around, associate with, how much exposure to the world that I have. And that was so limited.
When you were 15, 16, 17, did you think, I'd love to try makeup, or did you think about dating?
Of course. I mean, I feel honestly that sometimes it's nurture nature, right? So I feel like we are biologically programmed to just kind of develop our sense of self and curiosity about these things. So of course I wanted to, wear makeup. I wanted to date boys. I wanted to go to prom. I wanted to do all these things. But these things weren't allowed for me.
And your only escape then was the internet.
Exactly. I could dress up who I wanted to be on the internet, create Facebook profiles, and create a new identity for myself. And it was, in a sense, an escape.
Whose plan was it then to kill your mother?
It was my plan. I'm the one that came up with it.
And who bought the murder weapon, the knife?
I did.
On that night, what was running through your mind?
I think on that night, my whole thought process was not even focusing on what was about to happen. It was all about what kind of life would I live afterwards. So would I have different kinds of animals like a dog or a cat or a bird? It was planning for a future that I had been so desperately craving to have that the reality of the situation was the furthest thing from my mind.
So almost detached from that.
Very, very detached.
Where were you and what were you doing?
So the night of the murder, I was with my mom in our Habitat for Humanity home. We did several things that night before the murder happened. We watched a movie, and then we went to sleep, and then it happened.
Do you remember your last words with her? Was it a very normal conversation or a night?
I did. I did go to the kitchen and I gave her a hug and I told her I love you. And I remember, and I talk about this in my book, holding a pillow that she slept with like every night and crying into it and apologizing to this pillow as if it were her. And just saying, I'm so sorry and I love you. And just taking in the scent of the pillow. Because in a sense, it's like saying goodbye. And so those last words that were said, I don't take that back.
And when she was killed, where were you?
I was in the bathroom. So I was instructed to go to the bathroom and stay in there while he committed the act. And I didn't come out.
Could you hear her?
I could. And in that moment, like, I wanted to help her. Like, the thoughts in my head was, I want to help, but I was almost paralyzed in my own skin to move.
When it was over, when she was quiet, what did you feel? Do you remember?
I remember my heart racing. I remember trying to focus on my breath and trying to count how many times I was breathing because taking the next breath was harder and harder. And so after it was over, he knocked on the bathroom door, which was a sign for me to let him inside the bathroom. And then he instructed me to be fully nude. And then the rest of the night was very traumatic. And then we left the home and we stayed a few nights at a hotel until we could get a bus back to Wisconsin where he was living.
When you say very traumatic, you're referring to of a sexual nature?
Yes.
When you're describing this, you're so calm. You're so composed. I feel like you could almost be telling me about a night, at the theatre. Have you processed this, or do you feel like you've gone through it so many times?
I think that it's a little bit of both. I'm in therapy, and so in therapy we do talk a lot about the traumatic events that have unfolded in my life, and so I am working through those things with a therapist.
Yeah.
So.
Do you feel like you have confronted, or are you still confronting the events of that night?
Some things I've confronted. There are other things that I still don't want to talk about.
When you and Nick fled to Wisconsin, it was you who alerted authorities that your mother was dead.
It was. I feel like a lot of people feel like the words were very vulgar, which they were, in which I had her found, because I posted on Facebook a vulgar message. But the point was not because that's what I felt. The point was that I used her social media to post this, and I figured if it was a really weird message that seemed strange, someone would call the authorities and have a house check and check on the house.
And why did you want her to be found?
Because I couldn't stand the thought of her just being there. I wanted her to have a proper burial, funeral, I wanted her to be put to rest because, again, I didn't hate my mom. I loved her. I just hated my situation.
Did she have those things? Was she buried or cremated?
She was cremated, and her ashes are with my Aunt Claudia.
Do you have any thoughts or plans to lay her to rest, to scatter those ashes?
I often made my wishes known that I would love for her to be put to rest with my grandma Irma, where my grandma is buried. That's what she would have wanted. But again, since her ashes are not in my care, I can't tell someone
That's complicated.
to do that.
That's
So,
complicated. What was a normal day like for you at home with your mum? Because you didn't go to school.
right,
And she didn't work.
right,
And you said it wasn't always torturous and abusive.
right.
So what was it like?
I mean, a typical day would be just like us watching TV. We lived our life a lot of watching TV. So a lot of times I learned what life was like on TV by watching TV. So we would get up in the morning, watch TV. She would give me my medication and feedings through my feeding tube. And then we would watch some more TV. And if we had to go to like the grocery store, we'd go to the grocery store, but come back. She would have dinner, again, medications, and then watch a movie and go to bed.
And you knew, I mean, a lot of those medications had a horrible effects on you.
They had side effects that almost mimic symptoms of certain illnesses. So
did you come to dread medicine time?
I didn't like half of them. There was a lot that just made me feel funny, groggy, out of body.
How many years of your life did you spend being fed through the hole in your stomach?
I believe I had the feeding tube placed. Now, don't quote me on this. I was very young. I think at 8 years old.
Wow.
And didn't have it removed until I was 24. Yeah, 24.
So when you were arrested?
When I was in county jail.
Given your very strange home life, what was jail like for you?
Jail was actually scary at first. Because I'm around a bunch of women that I don't know in a completely different setting that I'm not familiar with. Jail was a small taste of what high school, I guess, would be like. A lot of the women were just there on drug charges and things that I wasn't familiar with. And so for about 4 months, they kept me on like suicide watch to observe me, see if I did have any symptoms of an illness. I did not. And so after that 4 months was up, they put me in general population.
And you've described jail in the past as some of the best days of your life.
Exactly.
I mean, how is that possible?
After county jail and I went to prison. So prison, you have a lot more freedom than county jail. You have a job in prison. You are allowed to, have a key to your room so you can come in and out of your room. There's so many more things that are available to you. So a lot of people think it's so restrictive. But for me, that was the most freedom I had ever had. I was like, I could have a job now. And, I was one of those people that's like, yay, I'm excited to have a job.
And eat normal food?
Eat normal food. Like this was
the independence that you had not experienced.
Exactly. It's a newfound independence.
So having served 8.5 years in prison, do you feel that you've done the time for your crime?
I really, really struggle with that. I feel like I understand that the court gave me a 10-year sentence and incorporated all of the mitigating factors, but they could give me 10 years in prison, but that's not going to stop the guilt and the regret and the remorse and the nightmares and the stigma that I have to live the rest of my life with. So in a sense, I have a life sentence. I'm just living it in a much bigger prison that is society's view of me.
Yeah, I guess that's, to your point, so many people, you have so many supporters and fans, but you also have a lot of people who want to give you a label.
Exactly. I try not to put myself in a label box, but it's like watching an origin story. So even on a villain, when you watch a villain's origin story, they weren't born a villain, were they? They got there somehow by something traumatic happening. And so some part of them changed at that point in their life. And so I wasn't born evil. I wasn't born a murderer. My circumstances took me there, and that was my path.
Are you a victim or a murderer?
I'm both victim and perpetrator.
And how does that sit with you?
You know, the saying, how do you live with yourself? It's difficult. It's not something that I think about every day, because if I was to sit here and constantly think about it day in and day out, I wouldn't be able to move forward with my life. And I have far too much support from my family to just crawl up in a ball and put a label on myself, shove myself in a box, and deem myself unlovable or unable to have a second chance.
Everybody deserves a second chance.
Yes. I fully believe that everybody deserves a second chance.
Do you think about how things could have been different had you confronted your mother, told the doctor, had it played out differently?
Of course. I mean, that is something that I think about. Sometimes I'm asked, hey, if you can go back to this point in your life, what would you do different? And I say, I wouldn't go back to right before the murder. I'd go back to when I was like little, like 5 years old, and tell one of my family members, I don't think that mommy is okay. I don't think she's being honest. And tell a family member, and this whole thing would have turned out completely different.
Because you were raised to be really a people pleaser.
I was, and in a lot of ways I still am.
Yeah. I sense that about you, actually.
Finding my voice has been a journey that I'm still working on.
Do you think you've found it?
Still working on it. I found my voice. Now it's about finding the courage to exercise it.
You met Ken while you were in prison.
I did.
So why did he reach out to you?
So Ken had wrote to me after watching my documentary, my first documentary, Mommy, Dead and Dearest, that premiered on HBO in 2017. And I was getting a lot of mail from people that watched the show, offering their support, and he was one of them. And our personalities just clicked. We're both very nerdy. We both have similar interest in movies and TV and I guess just life. And I was 25 when we met, and he was 24. So we were still very young.
And so your relationship was letters and then very limited prison visits.
Exactly. So we went from letters to phone calls, and then while we established a phone call friendship, then he started visiting me. So,
what do you love about him?
I love his energy. So Ken is very high energy.
He is.
Which I think kind of balances me out, because I think I'm calm for the most part. But I always say we're like two ponies on a field just running free together.
How can you be so calm given the life you've led already?
I think I try, unless there is something that really kind of freaks me out. I try and stay calm because I like to take in my surroundings.
Do you think that was also how you were trained by your mother, in a way, to sit and be calm and polite? And
It was. I feel like the only times that I'm ever kind of goofy is when I'm fully being myself behind closed doors, and I don't have to worry about how people perceive me or view me.
So is that away from the cameras?
Away from the cameras. It's kind of like in front of the cameras, I'm like, okay, calm, business, zone.
Wow.
But then behind closed doors, I'm like,
What does Ken love about you?
And he's always loved my heart. He's always loved my personality, because in a lot of ways, our personalities are similar. And I feel like we're able to be very open and honest with each other. We could have really deep conversations that we would otherwise never have with anybody else.
Okay, that's important.
Mm-hmm.
And that's amazing because you've skipped every sort of normal teenage boys, dating, forming relationships, long-term relationships. You have skipped all that.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you and Ken met in prison.
Mm-hmm.
You're engaged.
Mm-hmm.
You've since married someone else,
Mm-hmm.
got divorced,
Yes.
back with Ken and expecting his child. That's a lot of pressure on a relationship.
It's a lot. The good thing is we do have that foundation to build off of. In a lot of ways, we have changed over the years. I've matured. He's matured. We both were in relationships, for long-term relationships, and have learned things from those relationships that prepared us for what we are essentially doing, which is we are creating a family for ourselves. In a sense, we went our separate ways back in 2019, and we learned what it was like to be apart. And it was an experimental phase. It's kind of like, can I live without this person? Am I happy without this person? And if the answer is no, fate will lead us back to each other.
Mm-hmm.
And it did.
And here you are.
And here we are, and we have a baby.
So that's huge.
Yes.
And a lot of people will be wondering, how do you prepare to become a mother when the experience you have of a mother-daughter relationship is so extremely unusual and ultimately was fatal?
Right. I mean, I feel like there's no book on parenting. There's no way to know what the relationship between me and my daughter will look like, but I hope it's a good relationship, and I'm going to put the work in to be a good mother to her. I just want her to grow up happy. I want to give her all the things that I didn't get to have whenever I was little. Giving that unconditional love. My mother's love was conditional. I will give unconditional love.
So what does that look like?
Well, that looks like no matter what my baby girl wants to do, I support her. I want her to fulfill her dreams, whatever that may be.
And when you say your mother's love was conditional, you mean I will show you love, but only if...
Yes. My mother's love was, I will show you love only if you do as I say. And if not, then she would take her love away.
Do you have any fear around becoming a mother because of what your role model, if you like, your experience, your relationship was?
I don't have any fears of becoming a mother. I never did. I feel fully confident that I'm not going to be the kind of mother my mom was. And I feel very, how do I put that, offended when people try to put a stigma on those who have suffered a traumatic childhood and feel like they will therefore do the same thing to their children.
Like
I feel
the cycle of abuse.
Right. I'm not going to say the cycle doesn't exist. I just will say that my will to be a better mother than what my mother was is so strong that I'm not going to continue the cycle.
Yeah. Can we talk about some of the medical side of what you've gone through? What complications, what scars, what side effects do you still suffer, if any?
So I have a scar on my belly, which is from the feeding tube. I have one on my leg. I have some on my neck. So I do have physical scars from the surgeries. I no longer have 2 salivary glands that were located in my neck because they were removed.
Why were they removed?
My mom told the doctors that I drooled, and she would, before the appointment, she would put Orajel on my mouth to make me drool, and then we'd go into the appointment. I would be drooling, and they were like, okay, well, we're going to do this surgery to remove them then.
What is your message now for those doctors, the many doctors that saw you, that treated you, that operated on you? Would you like to see them held accountable?
I would like to see them held accountable. A part of me feels a level of anger
Sure.
that I don't understand how you could do tests and surgeries and only go on my mother's word when tests were coming back normal. That feels like a lack of professionalism beyond compare.
Since you were in prison and since you've been out of prison, I mean, is that something you have looked into? Have you asked those questions? Have you gotten the answers that you need?
I haven't looked into it to the fullest extent because it's like I'm trying to create a new life for myself, and that in itself takes up all of my time. It's like I want to move forward, and it's a lot of work, and I feel like I'm not doing my future any justice by looking in the past.
I think most people in your situation would feel very angry with the medical professionals. They failed you.
Lots of people failed me.
Yeah. I mean, your mother must have had a real way with doctors.
She did. She had one of those personalities that to the outside perspective, you would think she was the jolliest, happiest woman that almost had a childlike soul.
And loving too, because I hear neighbours and witnesses say that you two were like peas in a pod.
It was, and it was like that in my early years, and then in my later teen years, it was very performative. So when we'd go out in the real world to the public, we'd hold hands, and then we'd get in the house, and she would be so verbally abusive, and then she didn't love me anymore after that.
Well, do you think she knew you were finding yourself, that you in fact knew you could walk?
Oh yes, there was a point in which, we both had an understanding that I feel like something isn't right. She could sense that, and therefore it was at odds after that.
And you were walking on eggshells.
Exactly.
And she was trying to stay in control.
Stay in control. And it's really hard because when I was little manipulation tactics used to work so easy. But then as I got older, I built up a tolerance to those tricks. So she had to keep on upping the ante to control me.
So I guess on the medical stuff, you probably answered this, but is that something in terms of your medical history and the doctors, is that something you would advocate for in the future, or are you really focused on rebuilding your life?
I'm focused on rebuilding my life. If it ever becomes a passion of mine to really hold the doctors accountable, then that's an avenue I'll look into taking.
What was it like for you? You said you went into isolation on suicide watch in prison to see you come off the medication and to see what illnesses. What was it like for you in prison as it dawned on you that you were in fact perfectly healthy?
It was shocking to me. There were the things that I knew that I didn't have, but then as I went longer periods of time off the medication, I didn't get sick. I got better. My hair started to grow in. I started to get a little chunkier, gain some weight, and I started to become a version of myself that was not recognizable, but it was in a good way.
And you've had quite a physical transformation.
I've been transforming for a while.
Yeah. And what's that about? Just taking control?
Taking control, being the version of myself that I want to be.
When you went into prison, you had what was your education level?
I had a second grade level education.
At age 22?
24.
24. Wow. That's extraordinary. Did you feel out of your depth in prison? Did it dawn on you that you needed to, or that you wanted to study, to learn?
Oh, absolutely. I had a thirst for knowledge. I kept a dictionary by my bed so I could read through it and build up my vocabulary. I got put in educational classes where I graduated after 5 years of being in school for my high school equivalency.
See your face light up when you talk about that.
Yes,
about learning and studying.
It was a very proud moment for myself because I worked extremely hard on it.
Yeah. And why do you think your mum kept you out of school and learning?
I think it was a control thing. It was to control my surroundings and who I talked to, because we learn from our peers. So I assume it was so I didn't learn too much than what she wanted me to.
So you've got a school level education now
Mm-hmm.
at 33?
33.
33. So what is next? I'm interested in terms of, you said you loved learning, you wanted a job.
Mm-hmm.
What are the plans?
I do want to take college courses. So right before I got out of prison, I signed up to take college courses because they do have programs in prison for inmates to higher their education.
Mm-hmm.
But I was not able to get in before getting released. So I'm going to take some online courses.
Great. Because you really, like, you're in your 30s and you've not had a job apart from in jail.
Exactly. So, aside from social media and my book and my show, I don't have a 9-to-5, at least this point.
Well, let's talk about that, because that is, as you know, more than a 9-to-5 on many days.
Mm-hmm.
The reality TV life, the docuseries, the influencing, it's a lot.
It is a lot, and I've come to the point that I honestly feel like I'm gonna forgo all of it for a normal life.
Because since the moment you step foot out of prison, you've had cameras on you.
I have.
Do you regret that choice?
I don't think that was a choice for me. Yes, it was a choice to be in a documentary. However, it was not a choice for as much attention as I was hit with.
The media spotlight.
The media spotlight that was just enormous when I got released. Even my family, they expected it to be crazy and wild, but not to that level. And so when I came out, I was kind of new to everything because I was in prison. I wasn't allowed to watch documentaries about myself. So to me, all of it was kept away. I was so sheltered from it. So as I was experiencing this phenomenon for the first time.
And how has that been, rebuilding your life in front of the cameras and, having to constantly post? And
It's difficult. I'm never going to say that, I regret doing the show. I wanted to show the public what I was going to have to go through in this transitional period and how hard it was going to be, and share my life with the public. But now I think that I've done that. I've achieved that. I have put myself out there. I always wanted to put my story out there to educate people on what Munchausen by proxy syndrome is, advocate for victims that are in similar situations to me, if not in my situation. And I feel like I have fulfilled that.
And have you had a lot of those people in that situation reach out to you?
I have. A lot of people have wrote to me, sharing their stories with me. And I would love to, help each and every single one of them. But it's kind of like I'm just a person too. So I have no more avenues in which they could travel down than I have, I know knowledge-wise. So I give them emotional encouragement.
Yeah. Well, you've given a lot. It strikes me that you're pretty exhausted.
I am. I've given and given and given, and I've gotten to the point that now it's like, okay, I'm a mom now. I have someone that relies on me, and I have someone that I'm responsible for, and that's my own flesh and blood. So doing what's best for her takes center priority right now.
When we were baby shopping for clothes together, I couldn't help but thinking, that's something that I did with my mum, something a lot of young women do with their mums. Is there a sadness in those sorts of activities for you?
I mean, I try not to dwell on what I don't have, and I'm more focused on what I do have. So my stepmom, Christy, is a bigger role model to me and a more influential model as a mother to me than what my mom was. So I go shopping with Christy. I do all of that stuff with Christy. So she will be grandma to my child. So
Do you ever miss your mom?
I do. There are times around her birthday, there are times the anniversary of her passing that I absolutely think about her, and I do miss her at times.
How do you plan to tell your daughter your story and what happened to her grandmother?
It's
It's a tough conversation.
It is a tough conversation. It's one that I knew that I would need to have. I knew from day one that this conversation would have to happen with my kids someday. And that's why my book is so important, because this book is my legacy. My child, when she comes of age and the right time, she could read this book and see everything, read everything that I had been through for her to fully understand. And I will always be honest with her. Ken and I both will sit her down, have a conversation surrounded by family, and we will let her know what happened. She won't be kept in the dark about it. But we want to make sure that she has that support to process it.
Yeah, I guess it's all age appropriate as well.
Exactly.
You've got a few years before you have to
have that
chat.
conversation. So
Yeah. When we were looking at photos yesterday, you said something interesting to me. I think I asked you what you would say to yourself, little girl in the wheelchair. And you said, first of all, get up and walk. But you said, I would tell her to be brave.
Yes.
And you said I wasn't brave. And I thought that was interesting. There were many times where you were brave.
I think we don't even realize how brave we are until it's our only choice. Because sometimes you don't choose to be brave. You just kind of have to be.
Do you feel like your choice took courage?
My choice to have my freedom took courage, but not the actions that should have been taken.
Not the way it was done.
Not the way it was done. Yeah. So that was not courage. That was desperation.
You're definitely someone who looks forward, aren't you?
I am. I've always been that way.
Even
Look
when
forward,
you were little?
not back.
Yeah?
Even when I was little.
Kept you going?
Yep.